We want to welcome the people specifically who are watching on Facebook live right now. And later on, this recording will be available on our webpage, and it will, on the YouTube channel, and also on our website. Look under Hot Topics. If you were here in November and left something, we have it for you. I'm guessing that you know who you are. If you haven't already, please silence your phones. And if you'd like to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, I would ask you to stand now and we'll do it together. I pledge allegiance to the flag All right, good deal. And now, any elected officials or people running for office, we invite you to come introduce yourselves over at that mic. If you would, simply introduce yourselves and the area you are representing or area that you are running for. Also, for those of you who don't know, we are a nonpartisan organization. And what does that mean? All kinds of things. And also, we want to also keep up our good reputation, and that includes not clapping for any one particular candidate or elected official. I assure you, we can yell and scream and jump up and down after the very last person has introduced him, her, or themselves.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Kelly Sumrad, and I'm your Vice Mayor of Orange County District 5 Commissioner.
Hello, I'm Robin Dellinger. I'm the Chair of the Seminole County School Board.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. I'm Bale Dalton, and I'm running for U.S. House of Representatives in District 7, Seminole and Volusia counties.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, I am Felipe Souza Lazavalette, and I am running to continue the good work of Representative Ana Escamani right here in District 42, and welcome to District 42 for everyone who's visiting. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Keith Givens. I'm running for Maitland City Council. If elected, I'll be the first African American since Reconstruction.
That deserves something.
Good morning. My name is Chelsea Simmons. I'm running for Orange County Judge, seat 19. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Ziegler, and I'm running for Orange County Commission, District 3.
Short. Wow. Hi, I'm Judy Garabo Hayes, and I am running for Orange County Judge in seat 21.
Good morning. My name is Warren Lindsay. I'm a Winter Park City Commissioner.
Hello and Happy New Year. My name is Ayana Barrow, and I'm running for Orange County Judge, seat 3. You can visit my website at Ayana, AYANA, the number 4, judge.vote. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Aaron Lewis, and I'm running to be the first Orange County Commissioner for the brand new District 7.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Melissa Lopez Marantes, and I'll be running for Orange County School Board for District 1.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Samuel Vilches Santiago, and I am running for the Florida House of Representatives in House District 43.
Hello, I am Elizabeth Ingram, and I am Commissioner-elect for seat 1 for the City of Winter Park.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Myra Uribe. I'm Orange County Commissioner, District 3. I'm also candidate for Orange County Mayor, myraformayor.com. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Vincent Falcone. I'm a circuit judge presiding in a criminal division. Good to see everybody.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Monique Worrell, and I am your state attorney. Happy New Year. Wonderful to be here this morning.
Yay! And that concludes our program. Thank you for coming. There are a lot of folks running to represent all of us. Thank you all for being here. We would like to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors who enable us to do things like this. First off, our bronze sponsor is Cynthia McKinnon. Our silver sponsors are the Kindred Three, Joan Irwin, Sue Foreman, and Lee Rambo Kemp, as well as Lynn and David Barrelsman, and the Voting Voices, which also includes Michelle Levy, Laurie and Richard Wack, Charley Williams, Caroline Emmons Schramm. Our visionary sponsor, they're multiple, Jennifer and Phil Anderson. We're very grateful for all of you. So if you would, please stand and we can recognize you. So they don't call them hot topics because they're bland or lukewarm. This one is hot. We can't wait to be encouraged, right? The First Amendment is supposed to protect our ability to speak up, to report the news, and to challenge power. But those freedoms are under pressure right now. News reports tell of people being punished for speaking out or being canceled for expressing their viewpoint. Journalists are getting harassed, sued, and defunded for doing their jobs. Misinformation, formerly known as simply lying, is everywhere. How do we combat that? And how do we regain trust in an increasingly fragmented media ecosystem when people often want to live in their own echo chambers? This panel will be talking about things that keep free speech advocates up at night. Government trying to punish critics, mega corporations controlling the flow of information, and what happens when telling the truth becomes dangerous. They'll tackle the tough questions, share real-world examples, and help us understand what's at stake and why this conversation matters. We also want to give you examples of how you can make a difference in your community and around the state. Our moderator today is our own Charley Williams. We know him well. You've been around for 19 years. There are a lot of marriages that don't even last that long, so well done. In that time, he has served on the state board as well as chairing the State Voter Services Committee, and also was the first male president of this chapter, the LWVOC. He served 6 years as trustee for the Florida First Amendment Foundation, which I think had a booth there. If you haven't checked it out, please do, out in City Square. And he's also a founding member of the Alliance for Truth and Justice. It's all volunteers, and they work in concert with Montgomery-based Equal Justice Institute, EJI. Charley Williams, welcome.
Well, thank you, Jane. Good to be here to a 200-plus crowd for the first Hot Topics of 2026. And I want to give a shout out to the Hot Topics team because this, in my opinion, is one of the best civics-minded forums in the county. So say hello to Diana Smith and Karen Estrin seated over here, and let's give them a round of applause. Thank you both. As we get started, friendly reminder to do the right thing with your phone. And here's my short intro as we get started. What does it mean in today's world when we talk about the First Amendment? You should have the right to choose what you read, what you listen to, what you say, how you live, and the right and choose to practice your religious faith or not, and the right to gather and petition the government for change. Today, we're focused on two of those core tenets, freedom of speech and free media. The definition of both has taken a few twists and turns recently. If you've been reading your morning news feed, there's lots of news. that we may talk about. Is the government the ultimate decider of what constitutes free speech and a free press? I have to say there is something that we've never seen before, but some people seem to believe the First Amendment freedoms belong more rightly to those who hold power than those who don't. Free speech for me, but not for thee. I can't say that I want, but you can't. I can say what I want, but you can't. If you publish that, we'll punish you by proxy if necessary, using the levers of government to squeeze media. And that's a lot to cover. So let me introduce our panel. As I introduce you individually, come on up and get comfortable. First is Greg Herbert, a shareholder at the Orlando office of the international law firm Greenberg Traurig. His practice focuses on media and First Amendment law, defamation defense, and intellectual property issues. Greg was the co-editor and chief of his law school newspaper, the Harvard Law Record. He began his career in New York, primarily defending newspapers and other media organizations from defamation and libel lawsuits, before returning to his native Florida, where he's continued to practice media and IP law for the past 30 years. Welcome, Greg. Next, I'd like to introduce Bob Shaw, a retired editor who has spent 48 years working in newspapers, including as Washington correspondent for the Herald Tribune and then for the Night Herald, and as Tallahassee bureau chief for the Miami Herald, managing editor for the Tallahassee Democrat, and senior editing positions at the Orlando Sentinel. He is past chairman of the First Amendment Foundation, FAF, and their current president. FloridaFAF.org is the website. Bob, please join us. Last is Judith Smelser, who's president and general manager of Central Florida Public Media, previously known as WMFE. Her leadership has been particularly critical as public media organizations adopt to the elimination of federal and state funding. Judith also collaborated with Central Florida News and Oviedo Community News to create the News Collaborative Central Florida, which we'll be hearing more about today, and that's a good news story. Judith has been honored as Orlando Magazine 2004 Women of the Year and one of Orlando Business Journal's 2024 most influential leaders. That website, which is on your table, is cfpublic.org. Reminder, as you've heard, we're going to have an overtime afterwards upstairs. The full panel will be joining us. That doesn't happen too often. Roger Simmons, editor of the Orlando Sentinel, is here, and he'll be joining us well to join Judith and talk about the news from the collaborative. So today we're going to keep this conversational. Our timekeeper is right here. Most of these questions will be 2-minute focused, but we will do a little follow-up if you'll give me a little sign. So the first question: how have government actions and laws affected our ability to speak freely and report the news? In other words, where and how do you see First Amendment rights being infringed? And we'll go down the line, starting with Greg.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I need to emphasize my views today are my own personal views, not the views of my law firm or anybody else. I think a lot of scholars and commentators and legal analysts have called this age an age of new McCarthyism, and I think folks feel that the government has used all the levers of its power to punish or deter or censor speech that it does not approve of, particularly with regard to issues like DEI, LGBT issues, and teaching history. There have been litigation, which is the most obvious way. There's also been a lot of attempts by the government to withhold government funding or to punish private corporations or others in many different ways. And I think that's the most significant threat to the First Amendment that we've seen since the McCarthy era.
Well, thank you, and we'll follow up on that. Bob Shaw.
Good afternoon. I want to talk about a couple of cases we've been involved in. One in Tampa, where a a digital journalist was charged under the federal wiretapping law for accessing a password-controlled website to which he had the password. There was a photographer named Dave Decker who was arrested in South Florida while covering, again as a freelancer, while covering an ICE rally. He was in an area marked off for the public, but the Florida Highway Patrol arrested him anyway. We managed to get both of those charges thrown out. And I mention that as an example of we're trying to do at the First Amendment Foundation affirmative work, because for many years we've just been trying to block bad bills, block bad cases. Now we're going after them. But what I really want to talk about is what's happening to public records. And we'll get into this more. But I want to remind you that access to government information, access to government action is implicit in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and explicit to the Florida Constitution. You cannot be an informed speaker unless you have access to information. And that's going to be our biggest fight over the next couple of months, and one in which I hope we can count on all of you for assistance.
Thank you, Bob. Judith.
Well, good afternoon. It's an honor to be here representing Central Florida Public Media. You know, one of our written strategic goals this year is that anytime there is an important community conversation that touches on the importance of journalism or a free press, that Central Florida Public Media needs to be at the table, because we are the only local nonprofit news organization that serves the entire 9-county Central Florida region. And we are here to empower and connect our region through trustworthy independent journalism. We're here to stand up for journalism. Now, the biggest government action, to use your words, Charlie, that has affected us directly recently, or in fact in our entire existence, is the elimination of our state and federal funding last year. That left a $400,000 a year hole in our budget. Now, there's no ambiguity about why that happened. The lawmakers, the president, were very clear about the fact that they felt that we should be defunded because they took issue with journalism and content that was broadcast and published by NPR and PBS. Now, we are not NPR. We are a standalone, independent, local nonprofit. But want to be clear, we are local outlets like us are really the ones that are suffering from this action. But I do want to be clear, too, that this action has no bearing at all on our commitment to report the news fairly and accurately and thoroughly. What it may ultimately have a bearing on is our capacity to do this. So this year is make or break for us. This year is when we find out whether the incredible emergency response that we saw last year, including from many of you, so thank you, will turn into sustained investment. And I hope that we can count on all of you to make sure that it does.
Thank you, Judith. All right, the next question, which is also going to be a quick one for the panel. We'll let you all weigh in. There's we generally understand what is allowed and permitted under the free speech clause, but what is not permitted, if we could clarify that? Who wants to take a stab at that to start?
It's purely a legal matter, so I'll start. I also wanted to say it is an honor to be here with Judith and Bob, and I urge everybody to support their organizations. So what's not permitted under the First Amendment? I mean, most people know the old adage from Oliver Wendell Holmes, who said, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. But the reality is there really are very, very narrow limitations on freedom of speech and freedom of the press. You know, true defamation, falsely saying something about somebody that is false and causes them damage and is defamatory, is not permitted under the First Amendment. Threats, direct threats of violence, calls to violence against the government, fighting words, going up to people and saying nasty, horrible things that might provoke them to violence. Those are some of the things that are not permitted under the First Amendment. Obscenity also is a loose topic, but the point is, broadly, The First Amendment is there for a reason. It's the First Amendment, and it is there to protect controversial speech, not to protect garden variety speech. And the exceptions to it should be very narrow. Same with the public records law.
Greg, what about fraud?
Right, making false statements, generally that's a civil cause of action on behalf of corporations, misrepresentation, trademark infringement, copyright infringement, patent infringement, those types of speech that work a fraud, those are also very strictly covered. And even in a false representation case involving a corporation, you have to prove that the statement is false. So opinion is protected. You can say the food was lousy at a restaurant. You can't say that I found glass in my food if that's not true.
Okay, Bob or Judith?
There's another area that has become increasingly problematic, and that is the fact that the First Amendment applies only to government action against speech. It does not apply to private companies who are perfectly capable of firing employees who are saying things in public that the company doesn't like. And this has become especially, you saw this in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk assassination. You've seen it in connection with book bans in various school districts where individuals have said things on their personal Facebook page or other social media feed that their employer has taken issue with and has moved to penalize them. And unfortunately, that speech is not explicitly covered by the First Amendment. And there's further issues on public employees, teachers who have an obligation to a classroom, to a school district, can maybe be disciplined for expressing thoughts that their school district considers inflammatory on their social media. So that's becoming a much bigger issue than it used to be.
Okay, Judith?
So one thing I hope that Greg will comment on at some point is the actual malice question. And when it comes to defamation, I am absolutely not going to comment on that because I'm not a legal scholar. But I was thinking about this question, Charlie, and for us at Central Florida Public Media, it's less about what we can't do legally, because obviously we're going to obey the law. Those things are kind of no-brainers, but it's more about what we won't do ethically. We have a written ethics policy for our journalism that's easily located on our website, just like all professional news organizations do. And here are a few things that we won't do ethically. We won't take our sources' comments out of context. We won't color or shade facts for impact or editorial effect. We won't exploit people in pain or emotional distress. We won't offer an open forum to a single viewpoint without offering a similar opportunity for divergent or opposing viewpoints. We won't engage in pay-for-play, and we will never let money influence our coverage.
Thank you. So this next question goes to Judith, and I'm going to borrow a quote from your colleague in the media, Mary Ellen Kloss, who says, less local news means less democracy. So Judith, why is a free press, and particularly local journalism, as you've just referenced, important to democracy and a functioning civil society?
In 2 minutes. I speak about this for a half hour to an hour, but I'll do my best. There is a huge body of research on all the ways democracy and civil society are stronger when local journalism is stronger. Voter turnout is higher. Down ballot voting in local elections is higher. Split ticket voting is more common across parties. It's more common for people to join civic groups like this one, and like the PTA and the Neighborhood Watch and your Rotaries and things like that. But what I'm going to talk about is yesterday's Orange County Commission meeting, because the answer to your question was perfectly illustrated at that meeting in one moment. So yesterday at the meeting, as we reported and many other news outlets reported this morning, the Commission voted to reject the Central Florida Expressway Authority's bid to acquire more county land to build a toll road through Split Oak Forest. I'm taking no position on that, of course. In the course of that debate, though, here is what Commissioner Wilson said. She said, if it hadn't been for Molly Durig and Molly is Central Florida Public Media's environment reporter. If it hadn't been for Molly Traurig, this was going through CFX on consent. She said that if it hadn't been for Molly's reporting on this issue, she said, quote, "I don't know if we'd even be having this conversation." In other words, without local journalism, this land deal could have gone through with no scrutiny or no discussion. Now, I want to be clear. As a news organization, we have no stake, no position, no interest in which way this ultimately goes. But as a news organization, our job is to bring the facts to light so that the community can have a robust, informed discussion about the best way forward. That is how local news supports democracy in action.
Touché. Thank you, Judith. I know a lot of you were down there yesterday at Orange County. I was watching on Orange TV, and we have obviously a few commissioners here as well, so thank you all both. Next, I want to just show you a few news headers from the Sentinel recently as we lead into this next question. One is from December 28th. "We shouldn't have to fight for crosswalk records, but we will." Another header, "FDOT deletes crosswalk posts," which gets to the heart of what we're here to talk about, public records. So Bob, I'm going to start with you on this. "Our sunshine laws were once the model of how open government should work, but they've been weakened over the years. How do we get there, and what remedies are being discussed in the upcoming legislative session? You know, if reporters don't get their records, they can't do their story, and we as the clients don't get the truth we've been promised." So Bob, let me turn it over to you.
It's been a long, slow erosion. I've been doing journalism in this state for 48 years, and when I came here, you could get almost anything out of government, almost always that day. Now, delay, ignore, deny is the order of the day on the part of not only state government, but increasingly local governments. The Breckner Center at the University of Florida did a recent survey that ranked Florida 31st in compliance with public records request and 49th in fees. And what that says is that people are being charged outrageous amounts in order to get access to information. For example, we recently talked to a woman whose brother died in state prison, and she wanted access to his prison file, including his autopsy, and she was told it would cost her $100,000. A couple of years ago, the Miami Herald had to fight so hard to get records out of DCF, the Department of Children and Families, that a judge awarded the Herald legal fees totaling $376,000. So what we have today is a system that just, whenever it can, ignores us. When it can't ignore us, it delays us. And ultimately, if they don't want to turn it over, they say, nope, you can't have it. Go ahead and sue. And who can afford to sue? Increasingly fewer people. One last point, the decline in the public records law has been accompanied by the decline in journalism around the state. You know, Roger, when I started at the Sentinel in 2000 running local and state news, I had 375 authorized positions under me. I'm not sure what the number Roger has today, but if it's more than 50, I'd be very surprised. And with nobody watching the state and nobody suing the state, except in increasingly rare instances like what the Sentinel is doing, then everyone feels empowered. You can just ignore this damn public records law and just tell people to go away.
Thank you, Bob. Greg, then maybe Judith?
Yeah, just to make one quick comment, the crosswalk issue, the painting over the crosswalks, it encapsulates and summarizes everything that we're talking about here today. Government action clearly aimed at censorship. I mean, does anybody really believe that the state thought it was safer to cover these after they already publicly said it was safer to have a rainbow-colored crosswalk? So clearly, government action, viewpoint discrimination, I think there's really no question about that. And then, obviously, there's the cover-up. So we need people like Bob and people like Judith, local media reporting on this, and records rights organizations getting the records to expose the pretext, to expose the lie, to allow the public to know what their government is doing, why they're doing it, and be able to informally, in an informed way, criticize what the government's action is.
Judith?
Yeah, what I would say is public records requests cost money. They cost money, and they cost time, and they cost journalist salaries, basically. You've got to have experienced editors and reporters to be able to do this work accurately and well. And then you have to have a budget for increasingly high, as Bob pointed out, fees to do these kinds of record requests. And this is money that we as a public media organization simply do not have. We would love to be able to do this kind of work and to augment the work that the Sentinel is doing as staffing there is going down. But that's just really, except for in occasional cases, not feasible for us because of capacity. And we would love for that to change.
Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, we, the First Amendment Foundation, can offer limited help to people who are making public records requests. We can help edit them and focus them so that they're more likely to succeed. We can also, we have a staff attorney, unfortunately part-time staff attorney, who can intervene with government agencies and on behalf of the requester, and she frequently has been successful in getting the information that's being sought. So if you're having a public records issue, please, floridafaf.org, go on our website, contact us, and maybe we can help.
Thank you. Just as a point of information, in today's paper, there's two, there's one that's online, one that will be tomorrow, and that's an op-ed from the Florida First Amendment Foundation and Bobby Block, which goes over legislation, which we'll address a little bit later. And the other is news that underscores Judith and Megan and Rogers Everett with the News Collaborative, so FYI. Let me go to Greg. We're running into state censorship by proxy. That's a new term that's out there, in which business interests follow government's lead. Can you comment on this alarming phenomenon to muzzle the marketplace of ideas, especially ideas that run counter to whichever administration is in power?
Yeah, and this goes back to what I mentioned earlier with the government using every lever of its incredible power and purse strings to attempt to stifle, censor, muzzle speech and criticism that it disagrees with, and to attempt to promote views that it does agree with. You know, the large law firms like mine have seen it. Law firms have been under attack, have been threatened with all sorts of claims. Many of them have now engaged in self-censorship and eliminated their DEI programs, and not just law firms, of course, lots of corporations. Two examples that really point to how this is playing out are, on the national level, of course, CBS. CBS settled a ridiculously weak defamation claim that it never would have settled years ago because of the corporate ownership. CBS wants to curry favor with this administration, and they know that that's the way to do it. Many other news organizations have unfortunately settled very frivolous claims that in the old days, I think Roger knows well, they would have fought to the death over principle. A local example, obviously, with our major theme park here, who expressed a viewpoint on the Don't Say Gay bill and were attacked and punished and had their entire system completely reworked by the state government. So it's very clear that the government has figured out that they can get away with a lot by using their purse strings or by using punitive efforts or legislation to attempt to quell a criticism of the government.
Greg, follow-up. What about the glacial speed sometimes of the courts?
Yeah, well, going back to the actual malice standard, so there have been lots of lawsuits across the country, a couple of big high-profile cases here in Florida, including one that I'm handling, where the goal of it is to overturn New York Times versus Sullivan. And for anybody who doesn't know, New York Times versus Sullivan is a 1964 Supreme Court decision that imposed the actual malice standard for public officials. At the time, it's been expanded to public figures. To shortly summarize it, the purpose of it is to allow the press to easily defeat a lawsuit without having to spend a ton of money and a ton of time and go through a ton of invasive discovery if they're essentially commenting generally as a matter of opinion or a matter of making a fair report on a public official. So these lawsuits, the reason that's so important and the reason why the New York Times versus Sullivan should not be overturned, in my view, is that, I know a lawyer says anybody can sue anyone for anything in this country. God bless America. All right, it's true. We can do that here, and in other countries you can't do that. But those lawsuits, it's the cost and the time and the burden, particularly on the media, on our free press, that even if the lawsuit is frivolous, they can't spend the time and money to fight it. And the same thing with the public records request. So if we don't have a very high bar that allows the media to get rid of these cases right off the bat, which have been the norm since 1964, the lawsuits are going to be filed just to, not because they're going to win. I mean, the president has filed multiple federal defamation lawsuits here in Florida, including against the Wall Street Journal, a conservative paper, because he doesn't like what they said about him. And he knows he's not going to win those cases, but it's just a matter of trying to censor them. And
intimidation?
Intimidation, and it's the cost and burden of litigation. Justice moves slowly. They know that, and they can cause the press to spend a ton of money and possibly put them out of business. Gawker was put out of business, and that was in this state. And plaintiffs know that. If they don't like what a media outlet is saying, they can sue them and they can tie them up. And without a very high bar to success, like the Sullivan standard, those cases are just going to proliferate like crazy.
Anybody over there? Judith?
I think Greg brought up something really important to talk about, which is corporate ownership of media organizations. I think it's, especially right now, very important to look at who owns your media organizations. Because almost to a person, every journalist I know is in it for the right reasons. The owners, maybe not. And I think that's one of the things that sets public media apart, in that Central Florida Public Media and local public media organizations around the country are locally owned. Every decision about not only the editorial, but the governance and the business office, it's all made, all those decisions are made on East Colonial Drive for us in Orlando. All of these decisions are made locally, and no corporate interest is going to dictate anything about how we run our operation or what stories we cover or anything else. And so I think it's becoming more and more important to look at who owns the news source that you're reading, watching, and listening to.
And that gets into our next question, which is kind of centered around the issue of trust. And I'm going to do a lightning round with the audience. How many of you, during your daily news feeds and looking around at what you're reading and seeing, how many of you have been fooled or tricked thinking something was true and maybe it wasn't? Raise your hand. Well, I think we all have. We're very much eye-oriented, and we see things we believe at first, but then we learn they're not. So it's going to be a challenge. So when it comes to trust, panel, there seems to be a widespread distrust in media information and sources. What's causing this, and any suggestions on how we can be a little bit more steeled up? Bob, you want to start?
Well, I caution you, this isn't the FAF's lane, but let me enter it anyway. I think the first issue you have here is the fragmentation of media, which has not only brought down larger media gatekeepers like the Orlando Sentinel, the Miami Herald, like local TV, but has also allowed for the flourishing of small, opinion-heavy websites that enable people to go and seek and read the information that they want to read. And then they use that information, which is often wrong, is almost always incredibly biased. And they use that to say, well, you can't believe the Sentinel because I read this somewhere else. So I think that's, I'm going to let Judith in particular go on about this, but I think this is the fragmentation of the media landscape, the lack of editors, I think has been a big part of this.
Judith, I like your better on your website, independent, trustworthy journalism. Tell us more.
Yeah, so this is our lane. We think a lot about trust. We think a lot about how to build and rebuild trust. And your question, you said there seems to be widespread distrust. It's documented. Gallup has been polling Americans since the 70s about trust in media, and that graph just goes down. It is now at 28% of people who trust what they call mass media to report the news fairly accurately and thoroughly. It's really disturbing. And it's important for us as news organizations to acknowledge that part of the blame lies with us. Over the decades, we have done a really good job of telling you what we think you need to know. We've not done such a great job of asking you what you need to know, or listening to what your concerns are, what your joys are, what you think really needs to be told and amplified and explored and investigated. And so that's part of it. We're not so good, or we haven't been so good historically, at going beyond the usual suspects and who we talk to, and the tried and true narratives. And that's especially true and as the digital media landscape has exploded, making, frankly, more work for journalists without any more resources, and in many cases with declining resources. Part of the blame goes to the fragmentation, the upheaval in the information ecosystem. There is absolutely no barrier to entry anymore. And the positive part of that is that there has legitimately been a proliferation of diverse voices and viewpoints, and those are good things. The negative is that no barrier to entry and no gatekeepers means no common standards. Professional news organizations have ethics policies, have editorial processes, vet stories for accuracy and fairness. The vast majority of the digital content that you see out there has no such standards. And that has eroded trust. How to fix it? That's a long conversation. But one of the things for us as news organizations is we have to be better at listening. And the second thing is we have to be better at being transparent about how we do the work. We have to talk about our editorial policies. We have to talk about why it is that you should believe something that you hear or read on Central Florida Public Media more than you believe something else on TikTok. And at Central Florida Public Media, we have directed real resources, by which I mean staff time, which costs money, into doing that transparency and listening work.
Judith, hang on to the mic for a second. I'm going to just hold up a full-page ad which ran in one of the national newspapers, and it says, "Pursuing the truth under pressure, following the facts wherever they lead, fighting for the public's right to know." And let's talk about the news that we have here today, the Central Florida News Collaborative. Tell us a little bit more about how that's going forward to really give us the local news and fill in some gaps.
So first of all, I want to point out several members of the collaborative that are here today, Roger Simmons and Megan Stokes from Oviedo Community News, and I think Noreen is here somewhere. Noreen Dworkin, is she here? I don't know. So first of all, I think it's important to be grounded in what the challenge is here, right? I mean, we've talked around it, but let's just put some numbers behind it. Over the past 20 years, 3,500 news outlets have disappeared from this country. 3,500. In the early 2000s, there were about 40 journalists for every 100,000 people. 40 for every 100,000. Now, there are 8. In Orange County, there are 6.2, according to a new study that came out last year. You know, the business model for journalism has collapsed. Over 200 counties in the U.S. are news deserts. That means they have no source of local news. So what's the collaborative doing to address this? About a year and a half ago, about a dozen maybe a little more than a dozen local news organizations got together for a series of meetings. I can't do this in a minute, but I'll do my best. Got together for a series of meetings that we hosted at Central Florida Public Media to talk about how we could work together to make sure that our local counties never went on that list of news deserts. And we talked about all different sorts of things that we could do working together editorially and also on the back end to shore each other up. And we decided from those meetings to create the News Collaborative of Central Florida, which is a group of local news organizations and aligned partners that are putting competition aside in a cutthroat business to ensure an informed and engaged Central Florida. And we spent a year as sort of a ragtag coalition with no dedicated funding and no dedicated staff, and we just made this thing work. And through that, we published and cross-published over 100 stories about the local impact of the unauthorized camping law, which I know you all have been reading and listening to. And this week, we were very happy to announce our first dedicated hire. We now have a part-time project manager, thanks to $50,000 in combined funding from both a national funder, the Collaborative Journalism Resource Hub, and the Central Florida Foundation here locally. So this is a vote of confidence in this model, in this really revolutionary model. The idea that, hey, instead of having 10 or 12 almost identical stories about exactly the same thing, what if we had 10 or 12 different stories about different aspects of really important issues, and we all shared them? In this cutthroat, competitive industry, this is a revolution, and this is going to make a huge difference for this region.
Congratulations. And Judith, one quick follow-up. Just how many collaboratives are being formed around the country?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't know the exact number, but it is a model that's becoming more and more common. There are dozens of collaboratives that are popping up around the country. North Carolina, Oklahoma immediately pop to mind. I know there are many others, but this is a model that is being explored nationwide as news organizations acknowledge the fact that none of us can do it alone anymore. And we're never going back to a time, I don't think, when there's one primary news outlet that is your one-stop shop. That's the only thing you need to read or listen to or watch. And we're realizing if we want to do this work, we're better together.
Yeah. Well, Judith and Megan and Roger, thanks for your leadership. Very exciting. Bob, I want to come back to you because we've been talking about public records, and hopefully this legislative session may have a hopefully successful bill that passes, tighten this up to help us all. You want to clue us in on that?
Yeah, we have bills filed in both the House and the Senate. The House sponsor is a guy named Alex Andrade, who's a Republican from Pensacola, who, if the name sounds familiar, he led the investigative subcommittee that looked at Hope, Florida a year ago. And he made requests for all manner of public records from the DeSantis administration and the Hope Florida Foundation and got almost none. And we went to him and said, Representative, if you as a legislator can't get public records out of this government, how do you expect the citizens going to be able to? He said, I'm on board. So what this bill, in the House, it's House Bill 437. In the Senate, it's Senate Bill 770. The Senate sponsor is a black Democrat from Hillsborough County named Darrell Rousson. It would require that every agency, when it receives a public records request, respond within 3 business days to provide a cost estimate or to deny the request with a citation to a statutory exemption. That replaces language now that says they have a reasonable time to respond. Reasonable has been stretched to years in some cases. If producing the records will take more than 15 days, they have to say why in writing and with particularity. There's language in there that would reduce the costs of individuals who are making records requests, and legally, this is an important issue. It would prohibit an agency from asserting in litigation an exemption that wasn't first raised in a written response to the request. And finally, agencies held to be in violation would have to pay double attorney's fees and a penalty of $200 a day, that's the House bill, $500 a day in the Senate bill. So this, we believe, is a strong first step to put government on notice that they have an obligation, a constitutional obligation, to comply with public records requests and comply with the public records law. Does it do everything we wanted? No. Does it go as far as other states have in setting up, for instance, an ombudsman to negotiate claims? No. But it's a start. And it's the first time in 30 years that there's been an effort to amend the public records law on behalf of the people, as opposed to exempting information on behalf of elected officials, government officials, special interests, and a coterie of others. So please, if the one thing you can do, write your legislators. House Bill 437, Senate Bill 770. Thank you.
Okay, good deal. Thank you. Greg, before we move on, is there anything else you'd like to add on the defamation issue and that trend at either state and national level? You've kind of hinted on it, but the BBC lawsuit defamation that's being filed actually in Florida court, as well as a few others, is certainly curious.
Yeah, and the BBC lawsuit Charlie's referencing is that Donald Trump filed a $10 billion lawsuit, and I really wish the media would not report on the amount of the claim. The amount of the claim means nothing, so it's not really a $10 billion lawsuit. It's a lawsuit that satisfies the jurisdictional standard of the court, but anybody can put any number in a lawsuit. Suing them for $10 billion because he claims they selectively edited his speech on January 6th, which the media is, of course, free. The First Amendment allows the media to make a wide range of editorial decisions, and they're supposed to be giving wide breathing room to do that. And in addition, really no harm to Trump's reputation as a result of anything in that article, but nonetheless, that is an attempt, one of many, including the lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal in Miami about the Jeffrey Epstein birthday card, including a lawsuit against Hillary Clinton that was thrown out, where the attempt is clearly not to win the lawsuit. In a lot of those cases, once the media entity serves the opponent with discovery request, asking them, they're claiming that their reputation was damaged, you're entitled to a lot of personal details about somebody who claims their reputation was damaged. And in lots of those cases, the plaintiffs have dismissed and dropped the case. So they're clearly not filed for purposes of vindicating somebody's reputation. They are filed for purposes of intimidation and censoring speech. And just to back up 1 second, I realized I didn't explain the actual malice standard to anybody who doesn't know it. The actual malice standard for the press is that originally it was if you're writing about a public official, such as the president or the governor or any public official, any of the public officials here in the room, if you're writing something about them, you are not liable for defamation unless what you're saying you knew that it was false, or it can be shown that you had a reckless disregard for the truth. It's a very high standard to meet, and it's a standard that is addressed right away at the beginning. Very difficult to prove it. The Dominion voting versus Fox is one of the cases where they got pretty close to proving it, because they had text messages between the Fox journalists saying, God, what a load of junk this is that we're airing on the TV right now. And that's about the only way you can prove and satisfy that actual malice standard. And that is what the attacks on New York Times versus Sullivan and the actual malice standard, the entire goal is to make it much, much easier to burden and harass and sue the media and tie them up in litigation, expensive litigation for years.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes left. I invited the panel to ask each other a question or two. We'll see what we can do. But Judith, do you have a question for Bob?
Sure, Bob. I actually wonder who generally turns to the First Amendment Foundation for help, and how have you seen that changing over the years?
It used to be, it was almost entirely journalists. The First Amendment Foundation was set up 40 years ago by a guy named Pete Weitzel, who was my good friend and mentor at the Miami Herald. And he convinced the large newspaper groups in Florida, Gannett, Tribune, Tampa Bay, which was then and is now Independent, Knight Ridder, which was to seed the organization with $500,000. Now, the only way you could get $500,000 out of Florida newspapers today is if you're a hedge fund and you strip it. But be that as it may, it used to be we served as a clearinghouse largely for reporters and media organizations. But lately, the number of calls from private citizens has begun outnumbering those from journalists. As more and more people, it used to be that the biggest problems of access to public records were on the state level. Now, increasingly, we're seeing it on the local level, and I've got to believe that what local officials are doing are modeling what they see the state doing and doing with some success. So we talk to people, we try to help them edit down their public records requests to narrow it as particularly as we can, to identify the records that they really need, and complain when the agency then says that'll cost you 5 figures or 6 figures.
Okay. We're going to close out, but one more question. Greg, do you have one for Judith? Do you have a question for Judith?
Well, Judith, we've talked a lot of gloom and doom here today. Maybe we can end on a positive note. Any positive things to report other than the collaborative, of course, but any recent successes in the local media that you'd like to share?
Well, I can speak for my own organization, for Central Florida Public Media. Obviously, last year was a hard year, but the silver lining was all of you. We saw an incredible outpouring of support from the community. As I mentioned earlier, we saw the week after the rescission vote in Congress, we held a one-day on-air fund drive, emergency drive. We raised $200,000 in one day, which I believe is a record for the organization. We ended our fiscal year about 18% over budget for our membership budget, and that kind of emergency giving is really encouraging. But like I said, this year is the make or break. This year is the time when we see whether that emergency giving does turn into something more sustainable, so that we can sustain the service into the future.
Thank you. All right, it's time for your questions and answers. I see Gina Hall coming to the mic. Before we go to questions, 30-second wrap-up from each of you. What can the League of Women Voters of Orange County do to help you? We have 800 members league-wide, one of the largest in the country, and a network around the country and in this state. So let me start with you, Judith. 30 seconds.
Well, independent, reliable local journalism is a public good. It's vital for democracy, and it's a public good that the market no longer supports. So right now, we are really at an inflection point where communities have to decide whether they want to support local journalism in the same way that they have long supported other public goods that the market does not support, such as the arts and education and healthcare and social services. So what the League can do, individually as members and as an organization, is to amplify that message. And is to use your influence with local foundations, with businesses, with other community members to remember that local journalism isn't something that you can take for granted. It's something that we as a community have to decide we want to preserve.
Okay, Bob.
2 things. One, I've already asked you. House Bill 437, Senate Bill 770. The more expressions of support we can get for those bills, the greater the likelihood that we can get a hearing and passage. The second thing is, the First Amendment Foundation is the only entity in Florida that does what we do, that advocates for the First Amendment, that advocates for full freedom of information. We work in coalition with agencies, well, just, there's a card on the table. If you can find it in your hearts to make a contribution, please do.
All right, Leslie, Greg.
I would say support organizations like those of Bob and Judith here. And also, I'm very worried about our next generation. So I would say, please get your kids to get their news from reliable sources, not get off their phones, or if they're on their phones, at least follow the reliable news organizations out there, liberal or conservative. There are plenty of good, reputable, reliable news sources out there.
Let's give a hand for this panel. Gina Hall, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. What a great way to kick off our new year. If any members have a question you'd like to come up and ask our panel, that's fine. I would ask you one question, no comments. This is question and answer. And remember, there's other people that want to ask a question, so be directed in your thing. And it's my mic, so I get to play. So.
Hi, Warren Lindsay. Thank you all very much. One of my questions is in light of what you all said about either the possible erosion of New York Times v. Sullivan in like PBS and legitimate news organizations. Do you think that there's a fear now and that they are self-censoring what they do because they're afraid of either a change in the law or they're afraid of retaliation, whereas maybe a year ago or before that they would not do that?
We'll go down the line. Judith.
Well, I can't speak for PBS. I'm not affiliated with PBS at all. I can speak for my own organization, and I can say unequivocally no. Nothing will censor us. We will not be cowed by any kind of outside pressure, whether it be financial, governmental, otherwise. So our job is to report the news freely, fairly, and accurately, and we intend to continue to do that.
Okay, Bob.
I'd remind you of 6 words that the State Department of Education sent down to school boards a couple of years ago after passage of the book of what's been called the book ban law. And that bill required school districts to evaluate every book in their library in their classrooms. And the school districts were told, err on the side of caution. And that's why we're seeing Toni Morrison being blacklisted. That's why we're seeing Judy Blume removed from the classroom. So yes, there is intimidation out there. Judith, I admire and respect your organization, and Roger, yours. I don't believe either of you are intimidated, but so many others are.
Greg.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. There's no question that media organizations, corporations, everyday people. I mean, how many folks here have thought twice about posting something on Facebook or Instagram or something because you're worried that somebody may be looking at it? I think we've seen that people are being stopped at the border and being asked to turn their phones over. And there's absolutely no question that self-censorship is rampant. That is what the term chilling effect is about. The First Amendment is intended to prevent or minimize any chilling effect, but it's definitely happening. In respect to the book ban case that Bob mentioned, I did want to give a shout out to Judy Garabo Hayes, who was a lead plaintiff in the case opposing the book ban.
Judy, could you stand? Thank you.
And they won that case. They won that case, at least at the trial court level. It is now on appeal to the 11th Circuit. But Random House, Penguin, and a lot of other publishers stood up, and lawyers handled that case pro bono. So we need a lot more efforts like that to fight the tide here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next question is from David.
Yes. It seems all media sources, by the way, I subscribe to 2 papers to try to get a balanced view. are putting out what to think, but not how to think. Critical thinking seems to be swept under the rug. How important do you think critical thinking or how to think is for the media to get that message out, not just to put stories? I mean, it seems like the 6 o'clock news is nothing more than a police blotter. If it bleeds, it leads. If it catches fire, it leads.
All right, Judith?
Yeah, right. Okay. So I agree. Critical thinking is critical, right? So the basic job of a news organization is to give you the facts that you need to make decisions. It's to give you the facts that our community needs to have the important discussions that we need to have. Now, what we do at Central Florida Public Media and what our audience expects from us is to go beyond the headlines, is to provide the context. Now, that is not to say we're going to offer opinion, editorialize, any of that. But we do aim to provide more context because we have more time. You know, the standard news story on a lot of broadcast outlets is about 30 seconds, maybe a minute, which is like long. Our standard feature length is 4 minutes. It gives us the opportunity not just to tell both sides, and in fact, in that ethics policy that I mentioned, it commits our journalists to seek multiple perspectives, not just two, because often there's more than two. It's not just he said, she said, it's he said, she said, and they said, or whomever. And so that's part of what we try to do. Another thing that we try to do is to be a convener. You know, we host forums all the time. We take our local shows out into the community and we record them live, and we provide opportunities for the public to interact with the issue that we are addressing as part of that show. So those are some of the things that we try to do, and I can only speak for myself on my own organization, but those are some of the things that we try to do to go beyond just the basic headline topper, and to get a little bit farther below the surface. That's what we're committed to.
Okay, Gene, I think we have time for one more.
Okay. Scott?
Hi, Scott Hottenstein. What do you see the future of freedom of speech with regards to AI? Whether that's in regulation of AI or the effect of AI hallucinations or the ability to make some realistic videos and put it out there and perhaps confuse people. I was shocked that those cats who had learned how to dance were not real. So, like, is there any protection for that coming up?
Greg?
Yeah, from a First Amendment defamation lawyer's perspective, what I advise clients is, look, a false statement is the basis of a defamation claim. There has to be something that is demonstrably false and damaging, and whoever publishes it is liable. So any site that publishes something that is false, that originates from AI or originates from a human, is going to be liable for it. So responsible news organizations are going to be very careful to avoid that. They're setting up guidelines, and it'd be interesting to hear from Judith what guidelines or how they've tackled that problem. But the good news organizations know that they're going to get hit. They're going to be held liable if they're publishing something false, whether it comes from AI, and they know they need to be more vigilant. How it's going to ultimately affect the broader issues of free speech, I mean, at this point, who knows? But I think the internet has done a lot of damage already to the truth and credibility of information that's out there and people believing false things. So I don't know how it can get too much worse.
All right, we've got to wrap up, but Judith, just 30 seconds.
Oh boy, in 30 seconds. Okay, so we, first of all, let me assure you that everything that you read on Central Florida, on cfpublic.org, our website, is written by a human being, okay? And everything that you hear is reported out by a human being. We do have an AI committee. We are developing and have been developing and iterating AI guidelines on how we address these things. It's challenging, certainly, but it's important that we maintain the human touch. our own journalists are in charge of the editorial, while taking advantage of the efficiencies that might be offered by AI. I think we cannot ignore that as a reality. So we do need to find that balance. We are working to evolve those policies, and they will probably be evolving day by day, week by week, for many years to come. But we are definitely keeping a close eye on that.
Okay, Bob, wrap us up.
One thing, if you happen to be in Tallahassee on February 24th, the First Amendment Foundation and the Florida State University College of Law is putting together a symposium on AI and the First Amendment. There'll be 3 panels starting at, I believe, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Attendance is open. I believe you could also hook into a live stream if you go onto the law school's website. So anyone who can and would like to participate, you're more than welcome.
Thank you all. And remember, this panel will stay with us. We're going to be upstairs starting at 1:10. Roger Simmons is going to join us. I'm sure Megan too. And with this, I will turn it over to Kathy.
All right. Thank you very much to Charley Williams for moderating, and to our panel. We'll give them another round of applause. And you can head back. They have certainly given us a lot to think about. I'll invite you to go back to your seats if you'd like to. If you'd like to go back to your seat, you can. You don't have to, but they've given us a lot to think about and to talk about. So I encourage you, as you go forward, to use your right to free speech to talk amongst yourselves, but also every place you go. This is an issue that we should be bringing up, and they should know that the League is paying attention. We do have some calls to action. First, the legislature started meeting yesterday in Tallahassee. So call them, email, write to them often, pay attention, know who your representatives are. Check out the flyer on your table. This is a new resource from our friends at All Voting is Local. They have put together a voting guide very much oriented toward new voters, but all of us can use the refresher. It's about 17 pages long, and it's available in English, Spanish, and Creole. So check that out and share that again with neighbors who might be interested in organizations that you know. Read and share our weekly newsletter. Follow us on social media, like, comment, and share. Support our efforts as a nonprofit organization and volunteer your time by checking out our website at the volunteering tab. There's lots of ways that you can support the work being organized by our hardworking committees. On your way out today, you can check out our Hot Topics Town Square, where we have tables from some of our different organizations that are with us today. I want to highlight that we have elections coming up. We are off and running in this election year. So we have municipal elections coming up in March, but if you are in Eatonville, you must register by February 6th. If you are in Apopka, Edgewood, Maitland, Oakland, or Windermere, your registration deadline is February 9th. So if you need any updating, it's time to do that. This Saturday, we will again have a League contingent in the Martin Luther King Jr. Parade in Eatonville. We're gathering at 1 for a 2 o'clock parade. You can register at the volunteer link online, or just show up. And if you need an LWVOC purple shirt to wear, check out the merch table in the town square. Our DEIA Social Justice Book Club is not meeting this month due to lobby days, when a bunch of us are headed up to Tallahassee next week. But they will be discussing the current selected book at their February 18th meeting. That book is titled A History of Florida Through Black Eyes by Dr. Marvin Dunn. So you might want to check that out. Saturday, January 24th, so a week from this Saturday, our annual planning meeting is happening at the Winter Park Community Center from 9 to noon. This is excellent way to learn more about what we're doing and to have your voice heard in what we are doing as a league as we set our agenda for the next year. We have a new to the calendar event that you will find more about in the newsletter, but it's a fundraising event for leaguers and guests on February 17th. Its title is the Sun Setting on Clean Water? There's a topic for you. Today we do have hot topics overtime, as Charlie has mentioned. That will be upstairs. Where is upstairs, you might ask? Go around this wall. There are stairs. They are deceivingly long. So you might want to pass the stairs and go to the elevator. That will be starting at 1:10, so you have time to pick up your purple shirt on the way. Judith Smelser and Orlando Sentinel executive editor Roger Simmons will be discussing the News Collaborative, and all of our panelists and moderator have graciously agreed to continue the conversation. And remember I mentioned a history of Florida through Black eyes? That is the topic of our February Hot Topics. For Black History Month on February 12th, we will have the author, Dr. Marvin Dunn. He will be interviewed by fellow author, Dr. Rebecca McLeod. We do expect this to be a sold-out Hot Topics, so please register early. And as always, we seek to hear from you and to get your feedback so that we can continue to improve. So please, please, please fill out our survey. And with that, we are adjourned.